Hello and welcome to the Ground and Grow podcast. I am your host, Kayla Estenson Williams. So I am recording this episode on New Year's Eve. It'll come out next week, the first full week of January. So my kind of life update is just the holiday season. My family celebrates Christmas. So I was off last week. I'm off most of this week. Today is kind of an admin day, just kind of getting a little bit of stuff done, but I'll overall kind of have 2 weeks off for my Christmas, my New Year's, all of that stuff. Last week was a lot of busy and fun holiday things. Seeing my family, seeing my husband's family, doing lots of celebrations. So that was very nice and very busy. And it was kind of fun. I was reflecting on um, just our experience of the holidays and how it's gotten so much easier now that my kiddo she's 2.5 now. And I was kind of looking back and reflecting on her very first Christmas, which was so wonderful and sweet, right? Like we had been looking forward to a first Christmas with a little one for a long time coming. So that was really sweet and wonderful in so many ways, but it was also really hard, right? She was like 6 months old at that time. So she was still taking, multiple naps a day, pretty fussy, needing some more of that one-on-one intense attention all the time. And so I remember feeling really stressed with how our routines were off of our usual schedule and just going place to place, bopping around. It's not easy in general, but it's certainly not easy when you have an infant. So it was a great first Christmas with her, but it was also really hard. And so I was just reflecting on how much easier it was now, right? Like if you follow me on Instagram, you might know my kiddo is kind of dropping her nap early, I think, or it's just very inconsistent for her. And so I was crossing my fingers that she would take a nap when we had some family gathering things, just because I knew our night was going to be later and I wanted her to be able to stay up a little bit later and not get fussy. And she thankfully did. I mean, one of her naps was right when we got to a family gathering, which was okay. She stayed asleep as I brought her inside and took a little snooze. But it just so much easier, right? She's able to play on her own or play with her cousins, not get fussy when we're all opening presents or taking time for things, right? She's more in it and having fun and excited about it. So it was really nice. It was still busy, still a little bit stressful, but comparatively so much less stressful. So I just want to give a little note if you're even in the early years of parenthood, I think it's tough, but especially that first year or two, those holidays are a little extra challenging if you're like me, or if your kiddo is highly sensitive like mine is. It can be really challenging, and I just personally get kind of overwhelmed with that. So that was hard the first couple years, but now it's a little bit easier. So that's kind of my holiday update, is that with so much smoother, more fun. I'm looking forward to the future of more easy, smooth holiday seasons. So that is nice. Last week it was my birthday too. And personally, I over the years, I've just really enjoyed having relaxing, chill days, really just with my husband and my kiddo. That's just what I want to do on that day. So we went for a walk around a lake. We usually go hiking, but it was if you're in Minnesota, after Christmas, or after the 25th, it got rainy and warm and all of our snow melted. So I was let's not do our usual hike because it's just going to be muddy and gross. So we walked around the paved Lake Harriet, and went out to a lunch dinner, and it was just so nice and perfect. A couple family birthday celebrations too. So it's a busy couple weeks, which is why I take a lot of time off around the holidays, because I know I need it. But it does feel kind of nice. I've just had 1 week off, and today I was kind of excited to get a little work done and to get a little break from parenting. So this week my husband's had to work a little bit. I have to work a little bit. So we've just kind of been taking turns tag teaming because we don't have our usual childcare set up. But it's been kind of nice. So I was actually a little excited to get a little work done, to get a little bit in the groove. But then I'm also excited to be off for the rest of the week. And then I think I'm going to feel really fresh in that first full week of January next week, or when you are listening to it this week. I'm excited to get into the groove. And that kind of leads me to this episode a little bit. Today's episode is going to be a little different than as I've gotten back into the groove, I've shared a story mostly from Reddit, and we can kind of talk about my take on it and some psychoed and stuff. And this week I was kind of looking through Reddit posts and stuff, if there was a story similar to what I wanted to share, because I really just wanted to do some psychoed on goal setting, intention setting, and kind of challenging this whole new year, new me thing, which I think I did a little bit last year, and I'll probably do it every year, because I just think we need this regular reminder of it's okay to still be you and to still accept yourself and not feel like you have to make dramatic changes. It's okay to connect to this time as new intention setting, which I like to do too. But how we can do it in a way that's a little bit more sustainable and a little bit less, oh, I'm so gung-ho, and then it just falls off and I don't actually utilize it, or I feel like crap about myself because I didn't do it right. So that's the psycho ed I wanted to share today, and I couldn't really find a story related to it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about it, and I'll share a bit on my perspective of New Year's intentions, talk about what I recommend for my clients, what I found helpful for me in that, and maybe it'll resonate with you. Maybe it won't. That's okay. And I think that leaves me to it's okay to do whatever you want to do at this time, right? Some people love having some intention, some people love setting big goals, some people like to not do any of that at all, right? And so anywhere on the continuum is totally fine, but it's really about what is exciting for you, what is best for your mental health, what works best for you in this time. So for me, I do like to connect to some New Year's intentions. I think especially because it's my birthday is at the end of the year, and then the new year starts. For me, it feels like just a very fresh start. It feels like a good, a Monday of the week, but of the year, right? Okay, we're fresh, we're start. All these things are new. And so what I personally do, around my birthday, the last handful of years, what I've done is I jot down whatever year I'm turning. So this year's 34. So I jot down 34 things about this past year that I've really enjoyed, things that I'm grateful for, things that I'm proud of myself for, things that I'm enjoying, just to kind of reflect on the year, soak it in a little bit. And I think that has been nice this year, and it helps me just reflect on my last New Year intention and how that went for me. So last year, or today is the last day of this year for me, so 2024, my intention was really to enjoy the simple joys, to slow down a little bit, and connect to what are these simple things that bring me joy, that I can be more in the moment of, instead of bopping from thing to thing of all of the expectations and all of that. How can I slow down and enjoy what's there? So for me, it was doing a lot of gardening. We got chickens, which has been a huge opportunity for simple joys, because that's been really exciting. And having to slow down, right? It's oh, I've got to add this thing in my morning and evening routine that helps me. I get outside and I'm checking their water, their food, all of those things. So I have to kind of be a bit more mindful. But it, for us in our family, has been a really nice intention of being slow, right? Obviously not on really, really cold days, but most days, right? My kiddo's coming out with me. It's an activity that we're doing, right? Instead of going out on an outing and doing all these things, it's okay, let's check on our garden, let's check on the chickens, let's do these things. So that's been really nice. Obviously not really gardening right now because it's the middle of winter and we don't I don't have a beautiful greenhouse in Minnesota to be able to do that. So, but it's just been like getting into some new things. And then this winter, my simple joy has been getting into crocheting. I mean, I've crocheted, like my grandma taught me to crochet when I was like a teenager or like a preteen or something. And I've been like very inconsistent with it since then. Like I've known like the few main stitches, and every fall and winter I'll like make one thing. But this year's like, I'm gonna like get in the groove of it, get a little bit better, like perfect my tension a little bit more, learn some new stitches. And so that's been really fun. And for me, all of these simple joy things are really, how can I connect to what's here? Which also allows me to like disconnect online a little bit, right? Like when I'm getting into these hobbies, or like reading has been another thing that I've been trying to do more this year. And so these things allow me to like be present in my life a little bit more, or with things that I enjoy, rather than feeling like scrolling and checking out social media and feeling this pressure to keep up with the Joneses and all of that stuff. By no means am I saying like I'm doing all these great hobbies and I'm like so zen now, and I'm not like caring about what's going on, comparing myself to other people or whatever. Like that's obviously still happening. I'm still human. I still live in this world. But I think it's been helpful. I think it has been nicer this year. And so that's certainly something that I want to continue doing and continue engaging in. This is kind of dorky, maybe, but like if you crochet or knit or anything, you've probably heard of people who make like a temperature blanket. Like they will make a row or so each day of like having like a color for the temperature range that it is. So at the end of the year, you have this kind of visual of like, oh yeah, what was the temperature like at different parts of the year and all of that. And my plan, we're going to see how it goes. So I'm being flexible with it because I've never done a project like this before. But my plan is to kind of do an egg laying blanket. So we have 3 chickens, and like in the winter, they don't, right now, I don't think any of them are really laying eggs very much because they're molting and it's winter and they don't lay as much. But in the spring and summer and fall, they lay more consistently. Like they might lay an egg a day. So, usually we get 1 to 3 eggs a day when they're in a laying season. So I think it's going to be fun to see like that range of like, when are we getting the most eggs and all of that. So I'm going to make an egg laying blanket, which is like, feels really dorky, but I'm pretty excited about it. And mainly I'm excited about it because it's going to help me to be consistent in this hobby that I'm getting excited about, and just something fun, right? Like continuing on to this like simple joy piece, right? It's like a way that I can get excited about this and have fun with this. And it connects to my intention for 2025, which is consistency. So, and I think when I look at all of my like New Year's intentions, they very much reflect my season of life. And that's maybe a recommendation I give to you all too, is like, consider your season of life and what you need, right? Like sometimes we're in a season of life where like, I'm going to set some big goals and do some things and make some big changes. And sometimes we're like, I need to set some intentions to allow myself to be and slow down, right? So, obviously parenting is a big theme in my work and on my podcast and all of that. I know not all of you are parents, but hopefully this like you can relate it to your life in one way or another. But right, for me, like seasons of my life have been influenced by what stage of parenting we're in. And I think the early years were certainly like seasons of like slowing down, allowing life to be a little more simple, being mindful, connecting to like what's going on in the here and now, and just allowing, right? Because especially that first year or two, right? Like, yes, we can connect to like things that we do have a little more control over because that feels good for our mental health, but also there's a lot that I didn't have control over, and I had to kind of ride the waves. And so I had to like have some slower intentions there. And certainly I still am in that season of life, right? Like she's 2.5, like we're not in the like easy breezy. Not that any stage of parenting is easy breezy, but it's still like there's a lot going on that is out of my control. Naps, bedtimes, all that fun stuff. But it feels like I've got my footing a little bit more, right? Over this last year, I'm like, okay, I've got my footing. I can breathe. I can connect to some things that I enjoy. I have a little more time and space for myself or the things that are important to me. And so I'm like, okay, now I want to kind of get rolling a little bit more in a lot of different areas, right? So I've been very grateful and happy to do this. Over in early parenthood, I've worked much more part-time than usual. If you know me, you know that like I will probably never be like into the American 40-hour work week. I just don't think that's healthy for most people. If you're like, oh yeah, like let's talk about that. Like I have a podcast episode a ways back on the 40-hour work week and how it's just a made up BS thing. Maybe for some people it works really great, but I think for most of us it doesn't. It doesn't for me. And because I have my own business, I get to say like, I'm not going to do that. So I'm probably never going to be back to the 40-hour work week regularly. But my usual full time is like, quote unquote full time, is like a 4-day work week. Maybe like it's like 3 client days and 1 admin day. And when I had my kiddo, I was very slowly like adding in 1 day, adding in 2 days. Now I'm at 3 client days, but I don't really have an admin day. And I'm kind of just like crunching it in here and there when I can. And while that's worked well, I think I'm also kind of ready, like maybe not January 1st, but maybe like midway through the year or something to kind of like maybe add a little bit more in, right? Maybe 3.5 days or something like that, right? And figuring out childcare changes when she starts preschool and all of that fun stuff. Anyways, moral of the story, I'm feeling ready to like maybe not fully return to what my full-time work was, but maybe get a little closer to that because for me, I work really well in chunks of time. So before I became a parent, I like had a system that worked really well. Mondays are my admin day where I did all the things behind the scenes. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday were my client days. And I had caught up on all my admin work ahead of time, so I didn't have any more to do. Now I just am like getting admin done here and there in chunks. And while it works, and while I'm glad I can do that and make it work because I value it's felt like a nice balance for me to be able to be at home a little bit more in these early years. It's also kind of hard, right? Like it's hard to smash everything in and it's overwhelming. And then my brain just like likes to work in chunks of time rather than like, ooh, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. So I've kind of figured out like while our childcare currently is the same as what it is, I've kind of figured out like, okay, I'm going to dedicate a couple chunks of time to really get admin stuff done on my client days, but like have some time set aside. And I want to be consistent with that because I think when I don't have that time really booked in, I'm like, oh, I'll get it done and I'll get it done here or there. And then I kind of stress myself out because I'm doing stuff kind of last minute or in a rush or letting unnecessary stuff go to the wayside, right? Like, for example, this podcast, right? It's not a necessary part of my job, but it's something I want to be consistent at. But this last year it was the thing that fell, right? Because I didn't have time. So I'm hoping my goal is to be consistent with this and put out an episode at least every other week. Right now, I'm trying to do every week and see how it goes and see what it does. But don't hold me to it. It might change. I'm allowing myself flexibility to change where I need to. But moral of the story, adding in some chunks of time, getting a little bit more consistent. And yeah, it's on what season of life am I in, right? I'm in a season of life where I feel like I have some space to connect to some goals that I have in my life a bit more consistently, rather than just like, oh, how's this week going and what do I need to do? Now, note that I'm not looking at this intention of consistency in a super, super strict way. And I think that's important for all goals that we set is to figure out like, what amount of firmness am I connecting to this in, right? Like if it's really important to you, if you really want to connect to it, if you're like looking in and you're like, yes, this connects to my values and my long-term goals and these things, right? Like it's an authentic goal and intention rather than being like, I want to do this because so-and-so is doing this and I want to be like them, right? Where it's like, oh, this is for me. This is what I want to do. And how firm do I want to connect to this? How firm do I need to connect to this? Right? If it's like, okay, I really want to connect to it, like we might have a bit more firmness with it, right? Where we're kind of holding ourselves accountable, or we're checking in on it, or we have some accountability people in our life for it, right? That can be great. Or it might be one where it's like, okay, I don't want to be too strict on it because I don't want to feel like I can't change my mind with it, right? So I think that's why it's good to just keep checking in. Like, how is it feeling? Do I need to connect more to this, or is it feeling okay? And so for me, with this goal of consistency, right, it is, yeah, I want to maybe check in with myself every week, see how it's going, see where I need to adjust. But I'm not going to be so strict on it where it's like, here is my goal. And if I didn't check these things off, then I failed, right? But more of a, okay, this is new. I'm figuring out how to be consistent in this. And that's probably going to change throughout the year, right? Like, this is still a big question mark that we're still figuring out, but right, like we're thinking kiddo might start preschool around when she's turning 3. So that'll be like halfway through the year. So we might choose to do a little more childcare at that point. But so that's really going to shift how consistent I can be in certain things, right? If I have more childcare, if I have more time to connect to these things, right? Consistency. So knowing that I get to be flexible with it, I get to shift it up, I get to change it, but I don't want to be so strict on myself where it feels really rigid and the goal becomes bigger than me or what I wanted with it. And I think that's why, so in the psycho ed piece, now I'll talk a little bit about what I recommend when setting goals, specifically New Year's ones, right? I think it's kind of like timely, but I think it definitely connects to just any time you're setting a goal, right? Like it doesn't have to be a certain calendar time of year to do it, but just whenever you're like, hey, this goal is important to me, I want to connect to this. How can we do it in a way that really works for us? And one thing that I really like to connect to this is using the word intention here. So an intention is a little bit different than an external goal, right? These goals might be the outcome that we want. And I'm not saying we can't set goals, right? Like, we might have a goal. I'll use my little crochet blanket as an example for this, right? Like, yes, I have an end goal of like, I think it'd be cool at the end of the year to have this blanket that I crocheted every day. I might not actually crochet it every single day, right? But I might have like a day of the week where I get, those 7 rows in or whatever, right? But at the end of the year, my goal is I want this completed blanket that I crocheted according to how many eggs my chicken laid each day. But my intention with it is what's important, right? My intention is an opportunity to be consistent at this hobby and maybe learn a bit more as I go or feel more confident in it or carve out that time for me to do something that's fun, right? Like that's my intention with it. So that, yes, the goal is to finish this blanket, but the reason isn't because I want more blankets in my house, right? The reason is because I want to be doing that process, right? And so, yes, we might have goals that are connected to our intention, but for me, at the end of the day, if I end the year and my blanket looks kind of like I made some errors or like it, doesn't look great or it's not something that I'm like displaying proudly on my couch, like that's okay, right? Like I might feel a little disappointed. I want it to look cute, whatever, but like it's okay if it doesn't turn out how maybe I wanted it to, or if it's not like the most functional blanket I have in the world. Because my intention of like being consistent with something throughout the year is why I did it. And so as you are setting goals for yourself at any time of year for any reason, think of your why. What is the reason that I'm doing it? And if you're kind of like, oof, I don't know, explore your values, explore like how you want to feel about yourself, how you want to operate in your own lived experience, right? So these might be values of like being mindful or connecting with others or around acceptance or whatever. And so sometimes like these external goals, right? Like I think the most common New Year's goal is like fitness related. Hey, I want to like get into the gym this many times a week and I want to lose this much weight, or, whatever it is. And so with that, and I'm not saying that's a bad goal, right? Like, fitness goals can be really good for us, right? It's obviously good for our physical health. It can be great for our mental health, all these things. But ask yourself your why, right? If your external goal is connected to these external things, such as like, oh, well, I see this like fitness model on Instagram and I want to look like them. That is not going to keep you motivated throughout the year. In fact, you're probably going to feel crappy because you're not going to look like that fitness model, because you don't make your income being a fitness model. You don't get to dedicate your time and energy to that. You don't edit your photos in that way, like whatever it is. It's just not, yeah, it's not going to be something that you're probably going to feel like, oh, I've nailed it. I look like this fitness model on Instagram and now I'm happy, right? You might have some fitness goals of like, I want to go to the gym a few days a week and I want to start moving my body more or whatever, but connect to what is your why, right? For me personally, this may or may not connect to you, but for me, it might be more, oh, like I want to be able to move in my body in ways that support my long-term functioning, to allow me to be more comfortable and able to do the things that I love as I age, right? Or I want to be able to keep up with my kiddo and different activities as we go along. Or I'm doing this because it helps me work through stress and anxiety, and it helps me sleep better at night, right? Like these things that actually support me. So bring it back to your why. And I think, not that we can't have these external aesthetic goals, right? It might be like, I want to make more money because I want to have this big house, or I want to get more into fitness so I can look this way or whatever. Not that those goals are all bad. I'm not saying that by any means. But I think if we're looking at what's my why, and it relates more to how I can compare myself to someone else and feel like I'm good enough, that's usually this like red flag that's like, is that my why? Right? Is that my why? Because if that doesn't actually connect to my personal values and what actually supports me, it's not going to be motivating. I'm not going to be motivated by achieving those things because they don't actually fully matter for me. So if you are like, okay, I want to connect to some New Year's intentions, or maybe I want to rework it, or just have a more effective way at identifying goals and how I can connect to those more consistently, bring it back to starting with, what's my why? Why is this important to me? How does it support me? And then what are some action steps that I can do that I can sustain, right? So if I, for my little crochet blanket thing, right? Like if I was brand new and never crocheted before and I don't really know the stitches, or I like have never completed any kind of project in my life, I think expecting myself to crochet like 7 rows of a big blanket every week would be too much, right? Like I'd probably get frustrated with it. I'd probably get confused. I'd probably mess up the like second row, and then the whole project would be wonky, right? But I might still be in a little over my head because I've never made a big blanket, but I've made some smaller blankets before. I feel consistent. I've like practiced this new stitch that I'm doing, made a little mini blanket with it. Like I feel like, okay, this is something sustainable for me. Like I know what it takes to do this, and I can do that, right? But if it's something that I've never done before, that might be a goal that I can't sustain, right? Just like if someone has a fitness goal and they are going to try to like run 20 miles a week and they've never run more than 1 mile before, like that's gonna not feel sustainable, right? And you have no idea if it's actually going to feel supportive for you, right? So really figure out like, what is a way that I can connect to this goal that's realistic, that I can sustain, that I can continue connecting to, and give yourself permission to check in and change it. If you're working on a goal and you're like, I don't feel good about this anymore, I'm not happy doing this anymore, it doesn't align with what I need anymore, change it, right? The reason you're working on any goal or intention is for you. And if it's not working for you anymore, change it, right? Like no one else is the boss of you in these things. And so that's my 2 cents on New Year's intentions or just goal setting things is like, take it back to you. Allow it to be for you and allow it to be something that you get to grow in yourself with. And that might not mean you're growing in the same direction as like everyone on social media or in society or whatever, but something that actually feels good for you, that you get to look back and be like, ooh, like I feel really good about this. I connected to something that was super important to me and I grew in that. So those are my thoughts on all the goals and the setting intentions and all of those things. And again, take it or leave it, right? Like it might not align with how you want to connect to the new year and it might, whatever. But no matter what, I hope you are having a nice start to your new year, 2025, whether it feels like a fresh start or whether it just feels like another week. I hope it's a nice one. I hope it's a good week. And if you listen to this podcast and you enjoy any of the episodes, I so greatly appreciate a rate and review from wherever you're listening. Share it with someone who it's going to resonate with. Again, I have a goal of consistency with some of my work things, and my podcast is one of them. So I'm hoping to grow this podcast this year. And so I super, super, super appreciate any way that you support that, even if you're just listening or doing a little more. Have a nice day, and I will talk to you next week.